Hello, crafty friends, and welcome to my channel, Create with Kalia. I'm Kalia. Today I'm going to be scrapbooking using these pictures. I have a 4x6, four 3x4s, and one 4x4 picture that I plan on scrapbooking today. I am taking my color palette off of this ice cream and using my color coach to find some colors that I think are going to work well. I really like the orange of the ice cream picture, and so I'm trying to build off of a similar colored orange and use colors that I think will match well with the scoops of ice cream that were in that picture. As I look at the color coach, I am looking across using the triadic colors to pick out a color palette that I think is going to work well for my pictures and for this particular adventure. As you can see, I changed my mind several times about which colors I want to include and finally come up with this color palette that I think is going to work for me. I have pumpkin pie, bubble bath, pool party, granny apple green, and berry burst. When I look at all of the colors together, I do realize that the berry burst is not as purple as I want it to be, and I also want it to be a lighter purple. So I take out the berry burst and add in petunia pop. As I look at the colors next to each other and move the petunia pop back and forth, I realize that it works well next to both the bubble bath and next to the pumpkin pie, and that helps me determine my color palette. The vision in my head are puddles of color that will then be the background of my layout. I put some ink onto my glass mat and then I use a water brush to move the color around a little bit and to add more liquid into the color. As I work on this, am starting to like the color. However, when I put my white willow cardstock onto the puddle that I've created, I realize that it picks up a lot of the brush strokes, and I don't like the way that it has turned out. I try again putting some color directly from the ink pad onto my glass mat and adding a lot more water into the color before I put my white willow onto the puddle that I've created. Once again, I don't really care for the way that this looks. However, I realize I'm getting closer. The look I'm going for is towards the middle. So then I decide to try to use the reinkers for the ink pads and add water to that to thin it out and make it become the puddle that I'm looking for. As I run my brush through the puddle to mix the ink and the water together, I realize that this is what I'm looking for. When I scrapbook, I tend to use natural colors for my scrapbook pages because my family does a lot of hiking and outdoors things, and those are the colors that I naturally gravitate towards. However, I'm having a lot of fun with this layout, playing with some of the brighter colors in our color palette. As I take the white willow off, this is exactly the look that I am going for. I use some of the ink that's already in the water brush and use that to create some spatter around the orange puddle. I really like the way that this has turned out. It's exactly what I had in mind, and I continue creating the same effect with the rest of the colors in my color palette. If you're going to do a similar technique, my advice is to make sure that you clean your water brush thoroughly in between colors, and also make sure that you squeeze on the end of the water brush to make sure that all of the color comes out. I'm now putting my photos onto my layout in the design that I'm thinking I'm going to be using. I like having this black cardstock to help pull your eye into the pictures, but my initial thought was that I was going to use cardstock that matched the different swatches of color that I've used for the background. I bring in this Petunia Pop cardstock and realize that it actually is washing out my pictures and therefore isn't giving me the look that I want. I do, however, really like it as the background to my layout. So now I'm thinking that I'll cut down my white willow cardstock and leave about a 1/4 inch border on all sides of the Petunia Pop for the background of my layout. Stampin' Up! Now carries our full line of colors in two-tone cardstock. The dark side of the cardstock is considered the true side, and I'm choosing to use the light side for this layout. I'm really liking the way that this black cardstock looks behind my photos and decide to commit to that. I bring in my Elements of Text stamp And now I'm going to start my background stamping. I've now cut down my white willow cardstock to make it an 11.5 by 11.5, and also gut out the petunia pop behind to save myself cardstock. I've matted all of my photos in black, and I realized that the photo that I had that was 4 by 4 was looking way too big compared to the 4 by 6 photo. So I reprinted that, and with the black cardstock behind it, it's now 3.25 by 3.5. My vision was that I would do a lot of background stamping in the same colors as the color palette that I used. If I had this to do over again, I would not adhere my photos down before doing all of the stamping and instead take a pencil mark and mark where my photos were going to be and do all the stamping before adding my photos to the layout. The photos are from a fun visit that we had at one of our local ice cream shops in Rapid City, South Dakota. One of my bonus kids was in town on a trip with her college choir where they were traveling around North and South Dakota and ended up singing at Mount Rushmore National Monument. I find this little open heart on Feathered Fun and I start stamping that in the petunia pop color. We had so much fun showing my kiddo to this ice cream shop where we've spent a lot of time since this was her first time being able to go there with us. This ice cream shop is known for its fun flavors like sage, honey lavender, and even dill pickle ice cream. I bring in my A Day With You stamp set and stamp the open hearts in the petunia pop area on the right-hand side. I then bring in trusty tools for this kind of cloud-shaped stamp. The stamp is actually intended to be the paint at the end of the paintbrush in this stamp set, but I thought it would make a perfect background stamp for this layout and for what I have in mind. I stamp in both the bubble bath area and in the pumpkin pie area using this stamp. One of the things that I want to encourage you to do is to look at your stamp sets and try to find these embellishing or accent stamps that you can use in your own layouts. Next, I bring in Weekend Adventures and find this hash mark stamp and the heart stamp. I'm going to stamp in pumpkin pie at both corners of my photos to help give those a little accent. Then I'm going to stamp the heart 3 times in each of the pumpkin pie areas. Groups of 3 tend to be pleasing to the eye, and so that's why I'm choosing to stamp 3 times using the heart. I'm going to repeat the pattern and stamp 3 times in the bubble bath in each side of my layout in the bubble bath area. Again, I'm going to stamp 3 times as that's appealing to the eye. You'll see that I repeat several of the stamps in different areas to help bring some continuity both to the page and to the color swatch areas. I'm also going to use this X pattern from Weekend Adventures and stamp that in the Granny Apple Green area on both sides of my page. Next, I'm going to bring in Notes and Totes and bring in this stamp that looks like dots. I think it's actually supposed to be sand, but it's another example of a stamp that you can use for another purpose. I'm going to use this and stamp in Granny Apple Green on my left-hand page, and then also stamp in Petunia Pop on my right-hand page. This is another great example of using a stamp that was designed for one thing in a new way to help bring more visual interest to your layout. I'm once again going to bring in the open heart stamp from A Day With You and stamp in the pool party area on both sides of the page. I'm again repeating a pattern in different colors to help bring in that visual interest, but also to help bring in some repeating elements. Next, I'm going to bring in the Tags to Go stamp set and use this date stamp on my layout in the pool party area. This is a stamp where I do have to make sure that I'm careful to wipe off the edges of the stamp so that that doesn't end up creating marks on my layout of the edge of the stamp. I'm bringing in Sweet Blooms next and using the stamp that says, "You Make Me Smile." I'm going to be stamping this directly onto my layout in black. And because I'm going to be using my black ink pad, I know that I'm going to want to stamp it at least twice to make sure I get a nice dark crisp image. I use my 12 by 12 MISTI tool and position the stamp where I want it, then ink up using my black Memento ink pad. I stamp one time and then I stamp a second time, And after the second time I stamp, I'm very satisfied with how that looks and feel like it's dark enough. When I originally started thinking about this layout, I had planned on just doing background stamping as the embellishments for the page. However, as I look at the page, I realize that I do want more embellishments and a little bit bigger embellishment clusters on this page, along with some additional textures. I bring out my Full of Life 6x6 DSP and find a few pages that I think will work well for this layout. I really like the multicolored paper that I first brought out, along with these two pieces that have a lot of pinks on them. I decide that adding some tags to my layout will make a perfect embellishment. I'm going to start by trying to put the tags over on the left-hand page, and I realize that that's not where I want them. I also bring in some old Close to My Heart stamps. I'm going to be using Tutti Frutti, Summer Vibes, and Gnomes for Summer. I'm using these stamps because I don't have a lot in my stash right now from Stampin' Up! That's ice cream themed, and so I need to use some of the items out of my Close to My Heart stamps. The tags that I use are also from a Close to My Heart die set called Build a Tag. I'm also going to bring in more messages and use the die cut specifically for this smaller oval. I'm going to stamp the word enjoy from Tags to Go in black on the cut that I use from the More Messages die set. I'm liking these two larger embellishments over here under my title, but I realize that they're a little too tall, so I'm just going to snip a little bit off the bottom of them to help give myself the room that I need to fit them into that space. I'm then going to place the Enjoy stamp over the two ice cream treats, and that will help create my full embellishment cluster. Since I already have so much going on visually with this layout, I wanted to make these embellishment clusters relatively small. Next, I'm bringing in my black Stampin' Journalin' pen, and I'm going to fill in the date for my date stamp. I'm also going to use the journaling pen to create some stitch marks on the Enjoy tag. I feel like that helps give just a bit more to that particular embellishment, and it helps make it stand out a little bit more. When I'm done, I feel like it was exactly the addition that was needed for that particular embellishment. Next, I'm going to add the pink tag to the right-hand side of my layout. This tag is the die cut that coordinates with the Keeping Tabs set. Next, I'm going to bring in one of the ice cream cones that I have stamped from one of the Close to My Heart stamps. And I'm also going to bring in the Treat Yourself that I stamped and die cut out. I'm going to attach all of those into my upper right hand embellishment cluster. Last, I'm going to create the lower left embellishment cluster for this page. I've cut down two different tags so that they fit to become the base of this embellishment cluster. I'm going to add the two ice cream cones that I had die cut out and colored, and that helps create most of this embellishment cluster. I'm going to finish it up by adding some white ribbon and some black embroidery floss. When I add ribbon to a tag, I sometimes like to use two different styles of fiber as it helps make the tag feel a little bit more complete. I'm going to cut the black embroidery floss short and then cut both of my white ribbons at an angle to finish them off. If you've enjoyed watching this video, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button and also give this video a like. The last thing I'm going to do is to add my journaling. I've printed this off using clear Avery labels, and I'm going to just adhere this down to the page very carefully as it's very sticky and will attach firmly as soon as I touch the page. I'm going to burnish using my bone folder, and that will help the edges of the label tape disappear. I love how this looks because you can still see the splatter underneath the journaling. A full list of the products that I use to create this layout will be in the description box, so please make sure to check that out. And now my layout is complete. I love that this isn't my typical layout, but feels perfect for a trip to the ice cream shop. Thanks everyone for watching. Have a great day and craft on.